The room was silent. Cameras hummed, papers shuffled, and every heartbeat in that hall felt amplified. On one side of the Senate chamber sat Justice Clarence Thomas, stern, unreadable, and towering in silence. On the other, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, calm but burning with purpose. What began as a routine committee hearing was about to become one of the most explosive exchanges Washington had seen all year. Crockett had been underestimated before. A former public defender turned congresswoman, she was used to walking into rooms where power looked down on her, rooms where confidence meant everything, but respect was never guaranteed. And that day, as the cameras rolled, Clarence Thomas's subtle smirk told the audience exactly what he thought he was dealing with. He leaned forward, voice smooth and cutting. "Congresswoman, perhaps if you understood the law." It was a sentence that dripped with condescension, the kind of jab designed not to enlighten, but to humiliate. The reporters shifted. Staffers froze. For a split second, the only sound was the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. But Crockett didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on him, unblinking, calm, almost surgical. The tension was electric. And when she finally spoke, her tone was low, deliberate, and dangerous. "With all due respect, Justice Thomas," she began, "understanding the law is precisely why I'm here, to make sure it applies equally to everyone." It was a warning shot, the kind that signals the battle has officially begun. For weeks leading up to this moment, whispers had filled Washington. Ethics scandals, undisclosed gifts, and a growing chorus demanding accountability. Thomas had brushed it off, confident, untouchable, backed by decades on the Supreme Court bench. To him, this hearing was theater. But to Jasmine Crockett, it was a stage, one where truth would finally demand its moment. Her questions came sharp and steady, each one cutting closer to the bone. "Do you believe," she asked, "that a justice who accepts lavish trips and financial favors from political donors can still be considered impartial?" Thomas didn't answer right away. His lips tightened. The audience leaned in. Then, with a faint chuckle, he deflected. "Congresswoman, it sounds like you're suggesting corruption where there is none." That single laugh, that dismissive tone, was his mistake. Crockett tilted her head, studying him like a prosecutor who already knows the verdict. "I'm suggesting transparency, Justice Thomas. If the American people can't see the difference between justice and privilege, maybe the problem isn't perception. Maybe it's conduct." The room erupted, quiet gasps, murmurs, even the faint click of reporters firing off breaking news tweets. Thomas shifted in his chair. For the first time, his trademark composure seemed to crack. And that's where the shift happened. Every story like this, every viral confrontation that defines a political era, hinges on one moment, when power realizes it's being challenged not by noise, but by intellect. Jasmine Crockett wasn't grandstanding. She was performing surgery, methodical, fearless, and rooted in the law she lived by. Flashbacks of her earlier career painted the contrast even sharper. Years in Dallas courtrooms taught her to read arrogance like a map. Every smirk, every interruption, every man who thought she couldn't possibly know better. She'd seen it all. And that experience was written across her face now. "Let me be clear," she continued. "If any other public servant accepted gifts from political donors, they'd be investigated. Why should a Supreme Court justice be different?" Thomas leaned back, trying to reestablish control. "Congresswoman, your tone is unbecoming of your office." The audience froze. That word, unbecoming, hit like an echo of every condescending rebuke ever aimed at a woman who dared to speak too strongly. Crockett smiled, but it wasn't polite. It was the kind of smile that says, "You just walked into the trap." "Unbecoming," she repeated softly. "I think silence in the face of corruption is what's unbecoming. I think protecting privilege while pretending to serve justice is unbecoming. My tone, Justice Thomas, is the sound of accountability." And just like that, the air shifted. For nearly a minute, no one moved. Even the senators behind Thomas looked uneasy. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to win the room. Outside, social media was already exploding. Clips of the exchange were circulating under hashtags like hashtag Crockett versus Thomas, hashtag Justice Exposed, and hashtag Accountability Now. Cable producers were cutting live segments. Overnight, this was becoming the viral moment. But inside the chamber, Crockett wasn't done. She pressed further. Can you assure the American people that your rulings are not influenced by personal relationships or undisclosed benefactors? Thomas sighed audibly. Congresswoman, this line of questioning borders on insult. No, she replied instantly. This line of questioning borders on the truth. Her tone dropped lower, deliberate, cinematic. The kind of pacing that keeps an audience glued, waiting for the next blow. Because when Americans lose faith in the highest court, the entire foundation of democracy shakes. And the sad part is, it's not because they stopped believing in justice. It's because justice stopped believing in them. The words landed like thunder. From that point forward, the balance was gone. The veteran justice, once unshakable, found himself reacting. Defensive, clipped, visibly uncomfortable. And every deflection only made her point stronger. She recited case names, ethics rules, historical precedents, each fact a nail in the coffin of denial. This wasn't a viral rant. It was a masterclass in composure, the kind that makes viewers stay not just for drama, but for vindication. Minutes turned to hours. Staffers exchanged glances that said everything. We're watching history. When Thomas finally tried to regain footing with a legal technicality, Crockett countered smoothly. It's fascinating how interpretation changes depending on who benefits. You taught the nation that justice was blind. But lately, it seems she's just turning a blind eye. Gasps again, the kind that ripple through a chamber when truth gets too close for comfort. By the time the session adjourned, it was clear the courtroom belonged to her. As she gathered her papers, her parting words weren't loud, but they carried through every microphone in the hall. Justice is not a title. It's a responsibility. And if you can't carry it without bias, someone else should. That clip alone would dominate headlines for days. Commentators called it a masterful takedown, while others called it the most important accountability moment of the decade. But beyond the sound bites, what made it powerful wasn't just the clash. It was what it symbolized. The moment when a young congresswoman, armed only with truth and preparation, stood her ground against one of the most powerful men in the American judiciary and didn't blink. Because this wasn't just a confrontation about ethics. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything Americans feel when they see double standards thrive, when those who write the rules seem immune to them, when power mocks principle, and principle finally answers back. That's why the video spread like wildfire, not just because it was entertaining, but because it hit a nerve. Viewers shared it saying, "This is what accountability looks like." Others wrote, "Finally, someone said it." The hashtags grew into movements. Analysts dissected her every line on late-night panels. Even those who disagreed couldn't look away. By the end of the week, millions had seen it. But the real impact was deeper. It reminded people that courage in politics isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about standing tallest when others expect you to bow. And as the credits of the viral clip rolled, one quote from Crockett echoed online more than any other. Respect isn't given because of robes or titles. It's earned through integrity. That's the line that turned a hearing into a headline. That's the line that made viewers stay until the very last second. Because in a world drowning in noise, moments of truth still break through, especially when they come from voices no one expected to roar.